A 9-year-old girl and her grandfather set off on what should have been a routine camping trip. But they never returned home. For 7 torturous years, the girl's mother endured sleepless nights, while authorities hit dead end after dead end. But then, after a fierce storm, a maintenance worker at Lake Berryessa in California spots their old trailer lodged in the massive spillway of the dam. A breakthrough that would turn this cold case into every parent's worst fear. The nightmare always came at the same hour. Maurice Langford jolted awake, her heart pounding against her ribs as the familiar images faded. Lily's blonde hair catching sunlight, her father's weathered hands helping her into the camper, both of them waving goodbye. The red digits on her bedside clock glowed 4:45 a.m. She sat up in the darkness of her Ashland bedroom, pushing damp hair from her forehead. 7 years. 7 years since that camping trip, and still the dreams came with merciless regularity. Maurice wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to shake off the phantom sensation of her 9-year-old daughter's last hug. The sharp knock at her front door made her jump. At this hour? Another knock, more insistent, followed by a muffled voice calling her name. Mrs. Langford? Maurice Langford? She grabbed her nightgown from the chair, wrapping it tightly around herself as she padded to the front door. Through the peephole, she saw 2 figures under her porch light, one in a dark suit, the other in a sheriff's uniform. Maurice's hands trembled as she undid the locks. Agent Jonah Kessler stood on her doorstep, his FBI badge already out. Beside him, Sheriff Andrea Brody shifted her weight, her expression grim in the pre-dawn darkness. "I'm sorry to wake you, Mrs. Langford," Agent Kessler said. His voice carried the weight of someone delivering difficult news. "We've been trying to reach you for the past hour." "My phone?" Maurice glanced toward the kitchen where she'd left her mobile. "I put it on silent last night. I'm sorry. What's happened?" The 2 officers exchanged glances. Sheriff Brody stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. We've found your father's camper." The words didn't make sense. Maurice blinked, certain she'd misheard. His camper? But that's where? "At Monticello Dam," Agent Kessler said, "in the Glory Hole Spillway." In the what? Maurice's mind struggled to process the information. The Glory Hole Spillway at Monticello Dam was that massive circular drain she'd seen in photographs, a concrete funnel designed to handle overflow water. "I don't understand. How could a camper be in—" "Someone dumped it there," Sheriff Brody interrupted gently. "We believe within the last few hours. Emergency services are working to extract it as we speak. We need you to come identify it and some items that may be recovered from inside." Maurice's legs felt weak. After 7 years of nothing, of dead ends and false leads, this sudden development seemed surreal. Did you find—" "We should discuss this on the way," Agent Kessler said. "It's about a 2-hour and 40-minute drive to Napa County. The extraction team hopes to have the camper out by the time we arrive." I need to change." Maurice's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Of course, but please, as quickly as you can." She dressed mechanically, jeans, a sweater, tennis shoes. Her hands shook as she grabbed her purse and locked the door behind her. The black sedan waited in her driveway, engine running. As they pulled onto the empty highway, Agent Kessler turned from the passenger seat. "I know this is a shock, Mrs. Langford. We received a call around 2 a.m. from a maintenance worker at the dam. He was checking water levels after last night's storm and spotted something metallic lodged in the spillway." "The storm?" Maurice repeated. Last night's thunderstorm had been fierce, rattling her windows and flooding the gutters. But how could someone— That spillway must be, 70 feet across? How do you dump a camper in that? "That's what we're trying to figure out," Sheriff Brody said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Whoever did this knew the area well. They also knew the storm would create heavy water flow. We think they expected the camper to be crushed and swept through to the outlet." But it got stuck, Maurice said. Lucky for us, Agent Kessler nodded. The angle, the size of the camper, even with the water flow and storm last night, something prevented it from going all the way down. They drove in tense silence as the sky gradually lightened from black to deep purple. Maurice watched the familiar Oregon landscape give way to Northern California's rolling hills. Her mind kept circling back to the impossibility of it all. Her father's vintage Airstream camper, the one he'd lovingly maintained for decades, somehow ending up in a dam spillway. As they approached Monticello Dam, Maurice saw the police barriers first. The normally busy Lake Berryessa recreation area had been cordoned off, patrol cars and emergency vehicles clustered near the spillway viewing area. The morning sun had just crested the hills, painting the water in shades of gold and green. And there it was. Maurice's breath caught. The aluminum camper sat on the roadside, water still dripping from its riveted surface. Even from a distance, she recognized the distinctive shape, the rounded edges her father had polished every spring. But 7 years had not been kind. Rust streaked the once gleaming surface, and the windows were clouded with grime. Agent Kessler helped her from the car. "Take your time, Mrs. Langford." As they approached, a man in a Caltrans vest intercepted them. "Agent Kessler? I'm Dave Morrison, lead supervisor on the extraction. Hell of a thing, getting that out of there." "How did you manage it?" Sheriff Brody asked. Morrison gestured to the massive crane still positioned near the spillway. "Hydraulic rig and a lot of careful maneuvering. The thing was wedged at about a 20-degree angle, like someone just backed it right up to the edge and let it roll in. Stormwater was still flowing pretty heavy when we started. Could have gone real bad if it had shifted." Maurice stepped closer to the camper. Even damaged and waterlogged, it was unmistakably her father's. She could see the small dent near the door handle where she'd backed into it with her bicycle when she was 12. "The forensics team has already done a preliminary search," Agent Kessler said gently. "Mrs. Langford, I need to tell you, we didn't find any human remains inside." She nodded, unsure if that was relief or disappointment she felt. "But we did recover several items." He led her to a folding table where evidence bags were laid out. "We need you to identify these, if you can." Maurice's legs nearly gave out when she saw the red sweater. Even sealed in plastic, she recognized the purple embroidery on the sleeves, the one Lily had picked out herself at the craft store. "That's Lily's," she whispered. "And this?" Agent Kessler held up another bag containing a photograph. The image was water-damaged, but still visible. Her father and Lily standing in front of the camper, both grinning at the camera. Lily wore the same red sweater. Her blonde hair was let loose, just how she liked it. Her father, or Lily's grandfather, had his arm around her shoulders. Maurice's tears came then, hot and sudden. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to muffle the sob that escaped. "There's also this." Sheriff Brody showed her a digital camera in another evidence bag. "Do you recognize it?" Maurice wiped her eyes, studying the camera through the plastic. "Number." My father didn't use digital cameras. He was proud of his old film cameras, always said digital had no soul. "And these?" "More bags, fishing gear, moldy blankets." "The fishing tackle is his. Those blankets, too. My mother crocheted that edge pattern." Agent Kessler's expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Langford, I know we've discussed this possibility before, but with this evidence, your father's camper, his belongings, items belonging to Lily, we have to consider that Thomas may have been involved in your daughter's disappearance." "He was 60 years old," Maurice said, her voice stronger now. "He's 67 now if he's... How could he take care of a child alone? How could he hide for 7 years? It doesn't make sense." "We've seen cases of elderly individuals doing unexpected things," Agent Kessler said gently. "I'm not saying we're certain, but we have to explore every possibility." The forensics tech approached them. We'll be collecting DNA and fingerprint samples, though the water damage is extensive. Between the storm and the spillway exposure, we're not optimistic about trace evidence. Maurice noticed news vans pulling up beyond the police barrier. Reporters were already setting up cameras, drawn by the spectacle of a camper pulled from the famous Monticello Dam spillway. "Mrs. Langford," Agent Kessler straightened his tie, "I'm going to need to make a statement to the media. Would you like to say anything?" She thought of her father, of the man who'd taught her to fish in that very camper, who'd spent countless hours with Lily, fostering her confidence during Maurice's long work hours. The man who'd never missed a birthday, never forgotten to call. When the cameras rolled, Agent Kessler delivered his statement with practiced precision. "This morning, we recovered significant evidence in the 2001 disappearance of Thomas Langford and his granddaughter, Lily Langford. The recovered camper is being classified as a primary crime scene. Combined with evidence discovered 2 days ago, we are optimistic about new leads in locating both missing persons." A reporter called out, "Is Thomas Langford considered a suspect?" "We're exploring all possibilities. Mr. Langford remains a person of interest, as he has throughout this investigation." They pushed Maurice forward then, microphones thrust at her face. She tried to speak clearly despite her tears. "Dad, if you're watching this, please come home. Bring Lily back to me. We can still be a family. We can work through whatever happened." More questions came rapid fire, but Maurice felt herself breaking down. Sheriff Brody quickly guided her away from the cameras. "The camper's being transported to our forensics lab in Medford," Agent Kessler said as they walked back to the car. "We'll process everything thoroughly." Maurice watched the tow truck secure her father's camper, that familiar aluminum shell that had carried so many happy memories. Now it was evidence in a 7-year-old mystery, dragged from a spillway like some strange relic from the deep. As they drove away from Monticello Dam, Maurice pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of storm clouds. Somewhere out there, she hoped, her father and daughter were watching this same sunrise. The return journey to Ashland stretched endlessly before them. What had been empty highways in the pre-dawn darkness were now clogged with Tuesday afternoon traffic. Logging trucks, tourist RVs heading to Crater Lake, and local commuters all competed for space on Interstate 5. Maurice sat in the back seat, watching the familiar landmarks pass. Mount Shasta's snow-capped peak, the Siskiyou Pass, the welcome sign for Jackson County. 3 hours. 3 hours to think about that waterlogged camper, about the red sweater sealed in plastic, about 7 years of questions that seemed to have more questions for answers. By the time they pulled into the Ashland police station, the clock on the dashboard read 12:17 p.m. Maurice's stomach should have been growling, but the thought of food made her nauseous. "I know you probably want to go home," Agent Kessler said as he held the station door open. "But I'd like to review the case file with you while everything's fresh. Sometimes details emerge when we revisit the original investigation." The conference room smelled of burnt coffee and whiteboard markers. Sheriff Brody pulled out a thick manila folder, while Agent Kessler connected his laptop to the wall-mounted screen. "August 18, 2001, he began, pulling up the original missing persons report. "You called 911 at 8:47 p.m. when your father and daughter hadn't returned from their camping trip." Maurice nodded, remembering that terrible evening. "They were supposed to be back by dinner. Dad was never late when Lily was with him. When I couldn't reach his cell phone, I knew something was wrong." Officers were dispatched to the campground near Rogue River, Sheriff Brody read from the report. They arrived at 11:15 p.m. and found the designated campsite empty. Not just empty, meticulously cleaned. Agent Kessler clicked to crime scene photos. The campsite looked almost sterile, the fire pit cold and scrubbed, the ground swept clean of footprints. "No personal belongings, no food wrappers, no trace evidence," he continued. The forensics team said it was the cleanest wilderness campsite they'd ever processed. That level of cleaning suggested deliberate concealment. "But my father wouldn't," Maurice started. "I know this is difficult," Agent Kessler said, "but look at this timeline." He pulled up a new document. "The same day they were supposed to return, at 2:15 p.m., your father entered First National Bank of Ashland and withdrew his entire savings, $400,000 in cash." The bank's security footage filled the screen. Grainy but unmistakable, her father at the teller window, Lily beside him. The little girl held his hand, looking around the bank with typical 9-year-old curiosity. Nothing in her body language suggested fear or distress. "The timestamp shows this was approximately 6 hours before you reported them missing," Sheriff Brody said. "The teller remembered the transaction because of the large amount. She said Mr. Langford seemed calm, mentioned something about a business investment." Maurice studied her daughter's image on the screen. Lily wore the same red sweater they'd found in the camper. Her blonde hair was neat and combed. "He took her to get ice cream after bank visits," she said quietly. "It was their tradition." "Mrs. Langford," Agent Kessler's voice was gentle but firm. "The withdrawal, the cleaned campsite, the disappearance, the pattern suggests planning." The conference room phone rang. Sheriff Brody answered, listened, then handed it to Agent Kessler. "Forensics." "Yes?" "Excellent. We'll be right down." He hung up and turned to Maurice. "They've managed to access the memory card from the digital camera." The tech lab was in the basement, all humming computers and bright LED lights. A young technician named Carlos greeted them, gesturing to his monitor. "Water got into the camera body pretty bad, but these SD cards are tougher than they look. I recovered 27 images." The photos appeared in a grid on the screen. Maurice leaned forward, her heart clenching. There was Lily, building sandcastles by a lake, roasting marshmallows, laughing on a tire swing. She looked happy, healthy, older than 9, but not by much. "Check the metadata," Carlos said, clicking on an image. These were taken in 2005 and 2006. Then nothing. She would have been 13 or 14, Maurice calculated. "But this isn't my father's camera. He hated digital photography." "The model was sold at several big box stores starting in 2004, Carlos said. "Pretty common, unfortunately. But if we narrow it down to local and neighboring town purchases—" "It's possible he bought it to document Lily growing up," Agent Kessler suggested. "People change their habits." Maurice shook her head but said nothing. Her father had been stubborn about technology, still using a rotary phone in his kitchen, refusing to get cable TV. The idea of him buying a digital camera felt wrong. "Mrs. Langford," Agent Kessler sat across from her. "I understand this is overwhelming, but unless we find evidence pointing to another person, your father remains our primary suspect. The bank withdrawal especially—" "I understand," Maurice said, though understanding and accepting were different things. Sheriff Brody noticed her pallor. "You look exhausted. Let us drive you home. You need rest and food. We'll continue processing evidence and update you on any developments." Maurice nodded gratefully. The fluorescent lights were giving her a headache, and her legs felt unsteady as they walked back through the station. In the patrol car, she slumped against the window. The afternoon sun slanted through downtown Ashland streets, normalcy everywhere, people shopping, eating lunch, living lives uninterrupted by mystery and loss. When they pulled up to her house, Sheriff Brody turned in her seat. "Get some rest, Mrs. Langford. I know today brought more questions than answers, but this is still progress. After 7 years of nothing, we have something." Maurice managed a weak smile. "Thank you, both of you." She stood on her porch, watching the patrol car disappear around the corner. The house felt too quiet, too empty, just as it had for 7 years. But now her mind was filled with images. Her father's camper being pulled from dark water, photos of Lily growing up in a different place, and the $400,000 he'd taken from the bank disappearing along with wherever he had taken her daughter. Progress, Sheriff Brody had said, but progress toward what truth? Maurice stood at her mailbox, key in hand, the ordinary ritual feeling surreal after the morning's events. Bills, advertisements, a catalog she'd never subscribed to, and then her fingers found something different. A plain white envelope, no return address, no postmark, no stamps, just her name written across the front in careful script. The envelope felt thick, with an odd weight to it, not just paper inside. She carried it into the house with the rest of the mail, setting everything on the dining table. The unmarked envelope drew her attention like a magnet. Maurice turned it over in her hands, studying the handwriting. Something about those neat, precise letters made her breath catch. She tore it open. A single sheet of paper fell out, along with a black cassette tape that clattered onto the table. Maurice picked up the letter first, her hands beginning to tremble as she recognized, no, it couldn't be. The handwriting was neat, controlled, each letter formed with careful precision, just like Lily used to write, back when she'd leave notes on the refrigerator or practice her penmanship at the kitchen table. But this was different too, more mature, the letters slightly larger, the style evolved. Of course it would be different. 7 years had passed. Her daughter would be 16 now. Mom, I will see you again soon. Please listen to Grandpa. He is a kind person. He just wants what's best for me. If you don't listen to him, then we'll never meet again. Ella Maurice read it 3 times, her mind struggling to process the words. The threat at the end felt wrong, alien. The Lily she knew, sweet, trusting, always eager to please, would never write something so cold. But then, what did she know about the Lily who had lived 7 years away from her? What had those years done to her little girl? She picked up the cassette tape. No label, just blank black plastic. Her eyes scanned her living room, DVD player, stereo system with CD player, even an old turntable she'd inherited from her mother. But no cassette deck. When had she gotten rid of it? During the move? The renovation? Her father's house? He'd have one. The thought of going there, today of all days, felt like stepping into a minefield of memories. But she had to know what was on that tape. Maurice grabbed her keys and headed back out. The 15-minute drive to her father's house took her through Ashland's older residential district, past craftsman bungalows and Victorian painted ladies. Her father's place sat on a corner lot, a modest 1950s ranch with a wraparound porch he'd added himself. She still had her key. The lock turned easily, and she stepped into air that smelled of dust and abandoned spaces. Everything was as he'd left it 7 years ago. His reading glasses on the side table, a coffee mug in the kitchen sink, the calendar on the wall still showing August 2001. The cassette player sat on a shelf in the living room, part of an old component stereo system. Maurice plugged it in, relieved when the power light glowed red. She inserted the tape and pressed play. Static, then clearing, then a voice that stopped her heart. "Maurice, sweetheart, it's Dad." She sank onto the couch, pressing her hand to her mouth. It was him, unmistakably him, the slight rasp from years of pipe smoking, the way he stretched her name into 3 syllables, Maurice. "I know you're confused and angry. I don't blame you, but I need you to listen carefully. Lily is safe with me. She's happy, healthy, getting a good education. I've been taking care of her just the way I raised you, with love and patience and everything a child needs." The recording quality was poor, muffled, as if recorded in a small space. Maurice leaned closer to the speakers. "I can't explain everything now, but I had my reasons. Good reasons. One day you'll understand. For now, I need you to stop the police investigation. Tell them you want to move on, that you believe Lily and I are safe somewhere, and that's enough. If you do this, we can reunite. I'll explain everything, and we can start fresh, all 3 of us together again." A pause. She could hear his breathing, labored and heavy. "But Maurice, If you bring this tape to the police, I'll know. And if that happens, you'll never see us again. No one will ever find us. That's not a threat, sweetheart. It's just the truth. To prove you're willing to trust me, stay at my house tonight. Just tonight. If you can do that, if you can show that faith, then we can take the next step." The tape clicked off. Maurice played it again, then again. Each time her certainty grew. That was her father's voice. The phrases, the cadence, even the way he called her sweetheart, all unmistakably Thomas Langford. She went to the window, peering through the blinds. The street was quiet, just old Mrs. Chen walking her ancient poodle. No suspicious cars, no watchers. She checked the backyard through the kitchen window. Nothing but the overgrown vegetable garden and the shed where her father had kept his fishing gear. Every door got checked and locked, every window secured. Maurice felt foolish but couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching, waiting to see if she'd run straight to the police. In her father's office upstairs, she rifled through his desk drawers until she found what she was looking for, a shoebox full of cassette tapes. Her father had loved to record himself singing old folk songs, practicing speeches for the Rotary Club, leaving audio letters for relatives. She grabbed several tapes and headed back to the player. Johnny Cash covers, a birthday message for her mother's 70th, his practice run for Lily's kindergarten graduation speech. Maurice compared the voices obsessively, playing sections of the old recordings, and then the new message. They were similar, so similar. The new recording sounded slightly heavier, more gravelly. But that could be age. 7 years of aging, wherever he was. She found herself believing. God help her, she was starting to believe her father had really done this. Maurice collapsed in his old armchair, surrounded by scattered tapes, and let herself cry. The family photo on the mantel seemed to mock her, all 3 of them at Christmas, her mother still alive, Lily just a baby in Thomas's arms. They'd been happy, complete. How had it come to this? When the tears finally stopped, she remembered the digital camera. If her father had bought it, if he'd truly gone against a lifetime of technological stubbornness, he would have kept the box. He kept everything, warranty cards, instruction manuals, receipts filed by date. The cabinet in his office held boxes for every electronic device in the house, the coffee maker, the television, even the electric razor she'd bought him 10 years ago, but no camera box. So maybe he hadn't actually bought it before the disappearance, or if he had, it was afterward, just like the police suspected. But then, why was it in his camper? Why would he get rid of the camera? The camper, maybe? Sure, that's the kind of thing anyone would recognize as evidence. But a personal camera, if Lily were still with him, wouldn't he still be using it? Unless someone else had put it there? Someone who wanted the police to believe. She stopped that line of thought. The cassette tape's message echoed in her mind. Trust him. Stay the night. Don't go to the police. Every instinct screamed that she should call Agent Kessler immediately. This was evidence. This was contact. This could break the case wide open. But what if her father was telling the truth? What if going to the police meant never seeing Lily again? Maurice was torn by dilemma, but after a long moment of consideration, she made her decision. She would stay the night. She would give her father this one chance to prove his good intentions. Tomorrow, if nothing happened, she could always change her mind. She spent the remaining daylight hours cleaning. It gave her hands something to do while her mind churned, dusting the shelves, vacuuming the rugs, washing the dishes that had sat in the sink for 7 years. As evening fell, she made dinner from canned goods in the pantry. The simple meal of soup and crackers tasted like sadness. Outside, Ashland settled into its nighttime rhythm. Porch lights flickered on. Dogs barked their evening warnings. Normal life continued everywhere, but in this house, locked in time. By 9 o'clock, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical force. The adrenaline of the day had drained away, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Maurice climbed the stairs to the guest room. She couldn't bring herself to sleep in her father's bed. and lay down fully clothed. Sleep, when it finally came, brought no peace. Only dreams of empty campers and dark water, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of her daughter calling for help. The nightmare released her at 5 a.m. Maurice gasped awake in the unfamiliar guest room, her father's house pressing in with its silence. The window showed only darkness, and when she looked at the wall clock, its hands were frozen at 3:17, the battery long dead. Her phone screen hurt her eyes. 5:02 a.m., another early morning, another jolt from sleep. But this time she wasn't in her own bed. This time she'd spent the night in her father's house, following the instructions of a voice on a cassette tape. The envelope lay on the bedside table, where she'd left it. Maurice picked up the letter again, studying the handwriting in the dim light of her phone. The more she looked at it, the more wrong it felt. Yes, it resembled Lily's careful penmanship, but would her daughter really write such cold words? "We'll never meet again." It sounded like something dictated, not something that came from Lily's heart. And why hadn't her father written the letter himself? If he was the one making demands, why use Lily as his mouthpiece? She opened the bedside drawer, looking for tissues, and stopped. There, coiled neatly with its earphones wrapped around it, sat her father's old Sony Walkman. The silver plastic was scratched but familiar. How many times had she seen him walking the neighborhood with those foam headphones over his ears, humming along to his cassettes? Maurice pulled it out, pressing the eject button. Empty. The battery compartment held only the white residue of long-dead batteries. She padded to the kitchen and rummaged through the junk drawer until she found a package of AAs. The Walkman whirred to life with a satisfying click. Still working after all these years. Her father had always bought quality, maintained things properly. She slipped it into her purse, along with the letter and the mysterious cassette. At least she'd have this memento of him, whatever happened. And she could listen to the tape again whenever doubt crept in. She washed her face in the bathroom that still smelled faintly of her father's aftershave, changed back into yesterday's clothes. The house felt expectant in the pre-dawn quiet, as if waiting for something to happen. But nothing had. No knock at the door, no phone call, no sign that her staying here had meant anything at all. Time to go home. The drive took 15 minutes through empty streets. Ashland was still sleeping, only the occasional delivery truck or early jogger breaking the stillness. Maurice pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment, engine off, trying to center herself. On impulse, she pulled out the Walkman and inserted the cassette. With the earphones on, her father's voice felt more intimate, like he was sitting right beside her in the car. "Maurice, sweetheart, it's Dad." Asterisk. She closed her eyes, listening to the whole message again. The words were the same, but through the headphones she could hear more. The slight wheeze in his breathing, a faint echo that suggested a small room. And then, at the very end, after her father said, "Wave your only chance goodbye," there was something else. Maurice rewound, played it again. There, just a split second before the tape clicked off. Another voice, male, younger, saying what sounded like, "That's enough." Her eyes snapped open. Someone else had been there during the recording. Someone who'd told her father, "That's enough," and stopped the tape. The implications raced through her mind. If someone was controlling her father, forcing him to record that message, then everything changed. Her father was 67 now, if still alive. An old man, possibly sick or frail. How easy would it be for someone younger and stronger to manipulate him, to use him to get to the money he'd withdrawn? And if he wasn't acting alone, how could he possibly care for Lily properly? A wanted man his age couldn't just blend into society, couldn't enroll her in school or take her to doctors. He'd need help, partners, people who might not have Lily's best interests at heart. Maurice scanned her street with new urgency. The Hendersons' house next door had a dark pickup truck in the driveway instead of their usual sedan. Could be visitors, could be a new car, could be nothing. but the windows were so heavily tinted she couldn't see inside. She needed a second opinion. Mrs. Patterson across the street was already outside, watering her roses despite the early hour. Maurice stepped out of her car and called over. "Morning, Helen. Hey, did you notice anyone hanging around my house yesterday? Or this morning?" Mrs. Patterson looked up from her flowers. "No, dear. Why? Is everything all right? I saw on the news about that camper they found." "I'm fine, just, feeling a little paranoid." "Can't blame you, but no, I haven't seen anyone unusual. That truck next door showed up around midnight, but I think it's their nephew visiting from Portland." Maurice thanked her and returned to her car. The truck's presence still nagged at her. She sat behind the wheel, weighing her options. The cassette was evidence. The letter was evidence. That second voice changed everything. She couldn't handle this alone. She needed Agent Kessler and the FBI's resources. Her father's words echoed, "If you bring this tape to the police, I'll know." But how would he know? Unless someone, or her father himself, was watching her right now. Maurice made her decision. She reversed out of the driveway and headed toward downtown. The police station was only 10 minutes away. She'd turn over the evidence, let the professionals handle it. If her father, or whoever was controlling him, was angry, so be it. She couldn't gamble with Lily's safety based on vague promises and threats. 3 blocks from her house, she noticed the dark pickup in her rearview mirror. Same tinted windows, same aggressive chrome grille. It maintained a steady distance, matching her speed exactly. Her hands tightened on the wheel. When she turned right on Siskiyou Boulevard, the truck turned too. When she changed lanes, it followed. No doubt now, she was being tailed. Maurice pressed harder on the accelerator. The police station was just ahead, but the truck suddenly surged forward, engine roaring. It pulled alongside her, then swerved right, forcing her toward the shoulder. She had no choice but to follow its lead or risk a collision. The truck herded her onto a dirt road she'd never noticed before, trees pressing close on both sides. Her car bounced over ruts and wooden railroad ties. Finally, the truck angled across the narrow track, blocking her path completely. Maurice's heart hammered as the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out, 40s, medium build, dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She moved with purpose, not rushed, but confident. "Roll down your window," the woman said when she reached Maurice's car. Maurice kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. Through the glass she could see the woman held something, a folding knife, blade still closed, but ready. "I said roll it down. We need to talk." Maurice cracked the window 2 inches. "Who are you? Where's my family?" The woman leaned closer. "You don't know anything, do you? Should have stayed at the house. Should have trusted the message. Now you're going to do exactly what I say, or your family won't live through this, understand? Please, just tell me." "Get out of the car. Hands where I can see them. Give me your keys." The knife flicked open with practiced ease. Maurice raised her hands and slowly opened the door. The woman was stronger than she looked, her grip iron hard as she spun Maurice around and zip-tied her wrists with brutal efficiency. Muscles stood out on her forearms, someone who worked out, who trained for strength. "Phone," the woman demanded. Maurice nodded toward her purse. The woman dumped it out on the hood, pocketing the phone and wallet. "Police know your car, your plate, so we're taking your car first." "Where?" "Passenger seat. Move." The woman steered her roughly around the car, pushed her inside. Maurice's bound hands made the seatbelt impossible, but the woman didn't seem to care about safety regulations. She got behind the wheel, adjusted the seat with quick, efficient movements. They reversed back onto the main road, leaving the dark pickup abandoned on the dirt track. As Ashland fell away behind them, Maurice fought to keep her breathing steady. Somewhere out there, her father and daughter were caught in whatever web this woman was part of. The woman kept the knife visible on the console between them as she drove. "Take out your phone," she ordered. You're going to call your FBI friend. Tell him you're done with the investigation, or your father and daughter won't see you. I can't just... You can and you will. The woman's eyes never left the road. Sound natural? Convince him. If you don't, if you try to signal for help, I'll dump you somewhere they'll never find you. The girl goes with you. Understand? Maurice's bound hands made it awkward to hold the phone. She fumbled with it, finding Agent Kessler's number. Her throat felt tight as she pressed call. Mrs. Langford? His voice was alert despite the early hour. Is everything all right? Agent Kessler. Maurice forced steadiness into her voice. I'm calling to let you know I'm pulling back from the investigation. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? Finding the camper yesterday gave me the closure I needed. My father took Lily. I understand that now. I don't believe he'll harm her. Mrs. Langford, this is a criminal investigation, a kidnapping case. We can't simply... I know. Maurice felt the woman's eyes boring into her. But I won't push for it anymore. I need to tell you something I should have mentioned before. My father has had a syndrome. After my mother died, he became fixated on caring for young children. He never got to have more kids after me. That's why he always volunteered to watch Lily. Given your father's current age and the circumstances, we can't just let this go. Agent Kessler's voice carried worry now. Mrs. Langford, are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need... The woman snatched the phone from Maurice's hands. In one smooth motion, she popped the back cover, removed the battery, and flung both pieces out the window. Maurice watched her phone disappear into the tall grass flanking the highway. That was stupid, the woman said. He was getting suspicious. They drove in tense silence. Maurice watched the landscape change from Ashland's familiar hills to the wilder country beyond. They took Highway 99 north, then cut west toward the Coast Range. 3 hours in, they passed Monticello Dam. Police tape still fluttered around the Spillway viewing area, and Maurice glimpsed recovery vehicles parked along the access road. The sight of it made her stomach clench. Her father's camper had been pulled from that dark hole just yesterday morning. The woman noticed her looking. What a moronic plan, she muttered. Told him the storm wasn't enough. Told him the camper would get stuck. But no, he always knows better, that old man. Maurice swallowed hard. Had her father really worked with this woman? They turned onto progressively smaller roads, climbing into mountains she didn't recognize. The trees pressed closer, pine and fir creating a green tunnel. Finally, they reached what could barely be called a road, just dirt tracks with grass growing between the tire ruts. Cottages appeared through the trees, scattered far apart like forgotten thoughts. They looked abandoned, with sagging roofs and boards over windows. This wasn't a summer community or a resort. This was somewhere people went when they didn't want to be found. The woman pulled up to a cottage that looked slightly less derelict than its neighbors. Moss grew on the roof, but smoke drifted from the chimney. Another car sat in the overgrown driveway, engine running. "Stay here," the woman ordered. "Don't try anything funny." She got out, leaving Maurice tied in the passenger seat. Through the windshield, Maurice watched her approach the other car. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Not her father. This man was younger, maybe 50s, with the lean build of someone who worked with his hands. His face was weathered, angry. Their voices carried on the mountain air. "Colleen, what the hell have you done?" The man gestured wildly at Maurice. "Why did you bring her here? You're basically leading the cops straight to us." "Roy, I was worried. They found the camper. It didn't get crushed like you planned." Colleen's voice rose defensively. "I told you it was stupid, but you didn't listen. I just wanted the investigation to stop." Roy ran his hands through his hair, pacing. "What did you do? Tell me exactly what you did." "I used the old man's recording, the one you kept for Plan B, remember? We never needed it before, but I thought... I had the girl write a letter. Sent it to her." The slap echoed across the clearing. Colleen stumbled back, hand to her cheek. "You did all this without consulting me?" Roy's voice was dangerous now. "How stupid can you be? You've ruined everything." "Roy, please, deal with her." He jabbed a finger toward Maurice. "Get rid of her somewhere they won't find her. I'm not having anything to do with your mess. I'm taking the girl and leaving. I was already planning to go." Maurice's heart stopped. The girl. Lily was here, probably in Roy's car at this very moment. But where was Thomas? Was her father in there too? She watched Colleen argue, Roy dismissing her with sharp gestures. Her hands were tied, but her feet were free. If she could somehow get to the driver's seat, reach the controls. Moving carefully, trying not to rock the car, Maurice lifted herself and began sliding across the center console. Her bound hands made it awkward, painful. The gear shift dug into her ribs, but desperation gave her strength. Finally, in the driver's seat, she could reach the pedals with her feet. The key was still in the ignition, Colleen's first mistake. Maurice twisted her body, using her elbow to shift the gear to reverse. The car lurched backward. Through the windshield, she saw Roy and Colleen's heads snap up, their argument forgotten. Maurice stomped on the brake, cranked her bound arms to turn the wheel, then fumbled the gear shift into drive. Colleen was running toward her, Roy close behind. Maurice slammed her foot on the accelerator. The car leaped forward. She tried to steer with her bound hands, aiming for the space between them. But they dodged the wrong way, directly into the car's path. The impact was horrible. Both bodies flew backward, Colleen rolling across the hood before sliding off. Roy spun and fell hard on the gravel. Maurice hit the brake, her whole body shaking. Blood ran from Colleen's nose and mouth. Roy was trying to sit up, his face scraped raw, spitting red onto the dirt. They were alive but hurt, groaning and cursing. Maurice used her elbow to hit the unlock button and shouldered the door open. She stumbled out, her legs nearly giving way, and ran toward Roy's still idling car. Through the back window, she saw her. A teenage girl slumped in the back seat, apparently asleep. Blonde hair fell across her face, but Maurice knew those features, that particular tilt of the head. Lily. After 7 years, her daughter was just feet away, behind glass and locked doors. Maurice ran to the cottage door, her bound hands making her stumble. Mercifully, it was unlocked. These mountain people probably never worried about intruders this far from civilization. She burst into a dim kitchen that smelled of mold and old cooking grease. A knife block sat on the counter. She spun around, using her elbows to knock a butcher knife free. It clattered onto the linoleum. The challenge was picking it up with her wrists tied. Maurice dropped to her knees, maneuvering the knife with clumsy elbow movements until the blade faced upward, wedged against the cabinet base. She pressed the zip tie against the sharp edge, sawing frantically. The plastic was tough, designed to resist breaking. In her desperation, she pressed too hard. The knife slipped, the blade slicing along the side of her fingers. Pain flared, hot and sharp. Blood welled immediately, running down her palm. But the zip tie snapped. Maurice grabbed the knife properly and stood, cradling her bleeding hand against her shirt. An old rotary phone hung on the wall. She grabbed the receiver, spinning 911 with shaking fingers. One ring. Through the kitchen window, she saw movement. Roy was pushing himself up from the ground, blood streaming from his scraped face. He was limping, but moving with purpose toward his car, toward Lily. 911, what is your... Maurice dropped the receiver, letting it dangle and bang against the wall. Help, please, she shouted at the phone, hoping the dispatcher could hear. Mountain Cottage, Highway 99, past Monticello Dam. Kidnapping. No time for more. She gripped the knife and ran back outside. Roy had almost reached his car. Maurice didn't give him the chance. She kicked him hard in the back of his injured leg. He went down with a cry of pain and rage. Give me your car keys. Maurice stood over him, the knife shaking in her bloody grip. I'll stab you if you try to leave. I swear to God I will. Roy rolled over, laughing through the blood in his mouth. The sound was ugly, unhinged. "You'll stab me? You?" He wiped his face, smearing red across his cheek. "You're the one who abandoned her, left your little girl with an old man for a camping trip. What kind of mother does that?" "It was tradition." Maurice's voice stayed steady despite her racing heart. "My father took me camping. He took Lily. It was family tradition, not abandonment." Tradition! Roy spat the word like a curse. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying but staying upright. "You tell yourself that, but you handed her over, made it easy." He lunged. Maurice tried to dodge, but Roy was faster than his injuries suggested. His hand closed around her wrist, the one holding the knife. They struggled, Roy using his greater strength to turn her arm, trying to angle the blade back toward her face. A car engine grew louder. Maurice glimpsed a rusty sedan coming up the dirt road, slowing as the driver saw the scene, two bloodied people fighting over a knife in the middle of nowhere. "Help!" Maurice screamed. "Help us!" The car accelerated, driver clearly deciding this wasn't their problem. But the distraction made Roy glance away for a crucial second. Maurice tried to wrench free, Roy's face contorted with fury. In one vicious motion, he reversed the knife's direction and drove it into Maurice's stomach. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. She felt the blade go deep, felt the hot rush of blood. Her legs gave out. She hit the ground hard, both hands pressed to her abdomen. Through a haze of shock, she watched Roy limp to his car. He was leaving, taking Lily. But Colleen had managed to stand. She stumbled toward the car, reaching for the passenger door. "Roy, wait!" He shoved her away with brutal force. She was already weak from being hit by the car. The push sent her sprawling onto the dirt road. "You deal with your mess," he snarled. "I'm done with you." The engine roared, tires spun on gravel. Maurice, growing weaker, her vision starting to blur, watched Roy's car lurch forward. 20 meters. That's as far as he got. The sirens came first, then the flash of lights through the trees. Police cars materialized as if from nowhere, blocking the narrow road. Maurice heard shouting, commands to stop the vehicle, exit with hands visible. Through her fading vision, she saw uniforms converging on Roy's car, saw them pull him out, force him to the ground. The satisfying click of handcuffs. Somewhere behind her, Colleen's voice, weak and bitter. "I hope you die just like your father." The words hit almost as hard as the knife. Thomas was dead. Her father was really gone. Maurice felt herself fading, the pain a distant thing now, but then something pressed against her wound. Her eyes fluttered open one final time to discover that Colleen had driven the blade further into her abdomen, unleashing a new wave of excruciating pain. Colleen's voice cut through the haze as she blamed Maurice for destroying everything and taking Roy away from her. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, accompanied by urgent voices, shouting for medical assistance and reassurances that help was on the way. But all she could think about was Lily, still in that car, still just out of reach after 7 long years. The first thing Maurice became aware of was the beeping, steady, rhythmic, mechanical. Then came the weight. Her body felt like it was made of concrete, too heavy to move. Her eyelids fluttered open to harsh fluorescent lights and white ceiling tiles. A hospital room? The realization came slowly through the fog of medication. The door opened, and a nurse in seafoam scrubs entered. She smiled when she saw Maurice's eyes, tracking her movement. "Well, hello there. Welcome back." Maurice tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. What happened?" "Easy now, don't strain yourself." The nurse checked the monitors, making notes on a tablet. "You're at Providence Medford Medical Center. You've been quite the fighter, 3 days in a coma, but you pulled through. We moved you to this room about 30 hours ago, when you started showing signs of improvement." "How do I—" Maurice's throat felt like sandpaper. "How do you feel?" That's normal to ask. You've been through major trauma. The nurse's expression grew more serious. You suffered severe blood loss and a punctured kidney from the stab wound. I'm afraid the damage was too extensive. We had to remove the kidney during emergency surgery. Maurice absorbed this information slowly. One kidney. Will I? You'll be fine with one kidney. There will be some lifestyle adjustments, watching your diet, regular checkups, but people live completely normal lives with a single kidney. The nurse patted her arm gently. You're lucky to be alive, honestly. When they brought you in, it was touch and go. The girl, Maurice managed, in the car, was she? The nurse's smile turned sympathetic. I'll let the police explain everything. Are you feeling up to talking with them? They've been waiting. Maurice nodded weakly. I'll tell them, but keep it brief. You're still recovering, and we're monitoring your blood pressure closely. Too much stress could set back your recovery. Half an hour passed before Maurice saw movement outside her door. Agent Kessler appeared in the window, accompanied by another man in a suit. They knocked softly before entering. Mrs. Langford. Agent Kessler's relief was evident. I'm glad you're awake. This is Detective Noran from the local department. How are you feeling? Like I got stabbed, Maurice said, finding a ghost of humor somewhere. Your 911 call saved your life, Detective Noran said. You didn't manage to say much, but dispatch heard you shout for help. Then a neighbor called in, reporting a knife fight. We had units in the area following up on your earlier call to Agent Kessler. They responded immediately. Roy and Colleen Behrens are in custody, Agent Kessler added. Both have been charged with multiple counts, including kidnapping, murder, and attempted murder. Their first hearing is in 2 days. Maurice's heart raced, making the monitor beep faster. The girl in the car, was it? Yes. Agent Kessler's voice gentled. We recovered Lily from Roy's vehicle. She's 15 years old now, Mrs. Langford. Your daughter is alive. Tears flooded Maurice's eyes. How is she? Where is she? She spent one night in the hospital for observation, but physically she's okay. CPS has her in temporary custody while she recovers from the psychological trauma. She's been asking about you. I need to see her. Let me make a call. Detective Noran stepped out into the hallway. While they waited, Agent Kessler pulled up a chair. I know you're tired, but we need your statement about what happened. Are you up for it? Maurice nodded and slowly recounted everything, finding the letter and cassette, staying at her father's house, the second voice on the tape, being kidnapped by Colleen, the confrontation at the cottage. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, anger mixing with relief. You mentioned hearing them talk about your father, Agent Kessler prompted gently. They killed him, Maurice's voice broke. Colleen said something about burying him, and the cassette. Roy had recorded my father's voice for some Plan B that they never used. Colleen stole it when she panicked about the investigation. Agent Kessler nodded grimly. That matches what we've learned from interrogation. Let me tell you what really happened in August 2001. He pulled out his notebook, consulting his notes. Your father took Lily camping near Rogue River, just as planned. That night, they encountered Roy Behrens. He was hunting in the area, appeared at their campsite looking tired and hungry. Your father, being the kind man he was, invited Roy to share their dinner by the fire. Maurice closed her eyes, picturing the scene. Roy took photos of them with his digital camera, the one we found in the camper. When he saw Lily, something broke in his mind. She looked almost exactly like his own daughter, who died in a boating accident in 1999. The resemblance was uncanny, according to Colleen. So he just took her? He tried to lure her away when your father wasn't watching, but Thomas protected her, confronted Roy. That's when Roy pulled his hunting rifle. He forced them both into his truck at gunpoint. Agent Kessler paused, letting Maurice absorb this. Before killing your father, Roy made him withdraw all his savings. threatened to hurt Lily if he called for help or signaled the bank tellers. Your father complied to protect his granddaughter." "When?" Maurice whispered. Colleen's testimony confirms that Thomas was killed that same year, likely shortly after they recorded the manipulative message used for Plan B. That explains why the camera only captured photos of Lily in 2005 and 2006. Thomas was already gone by then. Roy brought Lily home and told Colleen their daughter had returned. Shocked and emotionally fragile from grief, she went along with it. The resemblance was uncanny, and her mental state made her more susceptible to believing it. They kept her for 7 years. Maurice's hands clenched the hospital blanket. They disciplined her harshly when she didn't comply, beat her with switches. Over time, Lily learned to call them Mom and Dad, to play the role of their dead daughter to avoid punishment. They told her that her grandfather had sold her for retirement money, that no one was looking for her. My God, Maurice felt sick. 2 days ago, they tried to dispose of some of Thomas's belongings, his glasses, a shirt, another Walkman. They wanted to remove all traces of her past now that she was older and fully under their control. But a hiker found the items and reported them. When the news broke about finding evidence in the Langford case, they panicked. Detective Noran returned, nodding to Agent Kessler. They'd kept the camper hidden at their mountain property, using it as storage, Agent Kessler continued. In their panic, they decided to get rid of it too. Roy drove it to Monticello Dam during the storm, thinking the spillway would crush it and wash the pieces out to sea. He accessed it from a service bridge upstream, but the camper got stuck instead. "And Colleen thought the digital camera was my father's," Maurice said, understanding dawning. "That's why she threw it in with everything else, but it was Roy's all along." "Exactly. Your instinct about your father not using digital cameras was correct." A soft knock interrupted them. A CPS worker entered, followed by a teenage girl. Maurice's breath stopped. Lily had grown tall, her blonde hair reaching past her shoulders. She was thin, too thin, with guarded eyes that looked older than her 15 years. But underneath the changes, Maurice could still see her daughter, the shape of her face, the way she tilted her head, the little girl who'd waved goodbye 7 years ago. "Mom!" Lily's voice was uncertain, hopeful. "Oh, baby." Maurice held out her arms, tears streaming. Lily rushed forward, careful of the IV lines and monitors, and fell into her mother's embrace. They held each other, both crying now. "They killed Grandpa," Lily sobbed against Maurice's shoulder, "right after he got the money. They made me think he sold me, but he didn't. He tried to protect me. They killed him, and I don't even know where he is." "Shh, sweetheart." Maurice stroked her daughter's hair, breathing in the reality of her. "Grandpa loved you so much. He'll always be in our hearts. We won't forget him, I promise." Agent Kessler cleared his throat gently. "We'll be searching the Baron's property once we get a court order. In cases like this, bodies are usually buried close to where the killers lived. We'll find him, Mrs. Langford. We'll bring him home." "Thank you," Maurice whispered. "Roy Behrens is a veteran with severe untreated PTSD," Detective Noran added quietly. Losing his daughter broke something in him. Colleen enabled his delusions out of her own grief. Their trauma and guilt made them increasingly paranoid, which ultimately led to their downfall. If they'd stayed quiet, we might never have found them. But fear made them reckless. Maurice held Lily tighter. Justice would come for Roy and Colleen Behrens. Her father would be found and properly laid to rest. There would be trials, therapy, a long road of healing ahead. But right now, in this hospital room with monitors beeping and her daughter warm and alive in her arms, Maurice felt something she hadn't experienced in 7 years. Hope. "We're together again," she whispered to Lily. "That's what matters. I'm going to get better as fast as I can, and we'll go home. We'll make new memories. We'll be okay." Lily pulled back just enough to look at her mother's face. Despite everything she'd endured, a small smile appeared. "I'd like that, Mom. I'd really like that." The sun slanted through the hospital window, painting golden squares on the white blanket. Mother and daughter held each other, no longer lost, finally found.